Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning from the city of Lagos, Nigeria. Good morning to the Good Morning Education Show tribe, to every one of you out there. We are glad to welcome you to the last show for the week, for this beautiful week that we have had. I hope it's been a great time for you and for all of yours. I welcome you to today's edition of the Good Morning Education Show. I am Finifulu Falodun, and I will be holding forth for the regular host of the show, Rotimi Eitayo. Other analysts will be joining us on the show as we go on today. It's our usual practice to have topics around issues in education, and sometimes we do hold some special series that just takes us out of the scope of education, but we usually would have a tie back to education. As you either join us live or you watch the replay, we implore that you share the link with your network. Let's not keep this good news to ourselves. And for every of our tribe members that come on, we like to have your comments. Please drop your comments as we go on in the show, and we will be glad to hear from you. If you have questions, please drop your questions also. As much as possible, we would answer the questions. Yes, as is our usual practice, we start off with the headlines from the world of education, the headlines in the news today from the world of education. And we will be coming up with that shortly. Okay, while we wait for the headlines of the news, one thing I didn't do was to acknowledge and to say good morning to the internet this morning. This week has been quite challenging for us connection wise. Don't know why that is, but this morning we say good morning internet, and please be kind this morning. So we seem to be having some network lag right now, so we'll go into the topic for today while other analysts join us. Our topic for today is classroom size and its effects on teachers. So we will be broadening that scope a little. It will not just be the effect on teachers, but the effect on the entire classroom, ecology. How does it have effect? Though we're streaming down to teachers and how it affects them. But then when we look at the classroom community and we look at the way that community runs, it doesn't revolve around just one person. It doesn't revolve around just one person who is a teacher. It doesn't revolve around just the students. It's a mutually collaborating environment. So we see what is the size of a classroom. What should maybe an ideal size is, though that's not something we really can determine what an ideal classroom size is or should be, but we can just hazard a suggestion and say, we can have this number in the classroom for more effectiveness and for more effectiveness of the teacher and of the students. We can have suggestions on that. So in many of our private schools, it seems generally looks like more of the classes are smaller, they're cozier. And one thing that COVID-19 did for us in education as one of the effects was that classroom sizes became smaller. Now, the classroom size is not about the physical size. It's not about the size of the room. The classroom size we're referring to is the number of students in the classroom. Okay, so at this point, we will take a pause. I will take a pause rather, and bring us the headlines from the news this morning. Our first headline says we're at risk of food scarcity. Well, we know that food is one of the essential and main um, one of the main needs of a human one of the top three needs of a human being. Feeding, food is one of them. And when we have children who go to school on empty tummies, not just children, teachers who go to school on empty tummies, school workers who are hungry, definitely we're not having the best that we can in our for the system. So the risk of food scarcity is something that we all should be a part of. Is it about the global warming? Is it about the change in weather? We're seeing that rains are being delayed. There's been a lot of heat. That could be part of the effects, but we're hoping that we can all get proactive, because we need to move away from putting everything on the government and saying, no, the government should do this, the government or the government should do that. We need to also be proactive in growing backyard gardens, growing our food, and at least being able to sustain ourselves in our own little corner. Yeah, another headline says SANU faults NUC's suspension of Unijos vice chancellorship race. Yeah, we've had a lot of this stories, headlines on issues surrounding school leadership, institution leaderships, and really, I think I said that earlier in the week. I just hope and wait to see an end to all of this. We need to have the leadership right so that we can have these institutions run properly, run well. But then it can't continue being the recurring decimal. We are moving away from strikes now. We're moving away from lecturers' demands now, and we're moving more into leadership issues here and there. Now SANU is coming in to talk about the suspension of Unijos vice chancellorship race. They need to have a vice chancellor, and even if they don't have, or maybe a substantive vice chancellor, there should be a management team running the school. We can't keep all students out of school or keep their lives on hold simply because the school cannot manage itself and have an up and running management team. So we hope this is sorted out on time and that we can have the academic session running smoothly. JAMB announces new feature in UTME registration. So recently there's been quite a number of innovations from from the exam body, the joint matriculation examination body, and now they're saying that to further fortify the registration process and ensure that candidates know where and who is registering, the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board has made provisions for the image of the registration officer to be displayed at the corner of the screen, being used to register the candidates beside his biometric details. So that means that if the face or if the picture of the registration officer does not match the face of the person actually registering the students, they need to raise an alarm so that the person they're seeing or the person they're interacting with for registration is flagged, and that their registration is not voided, and such a person can be dealt with. This is a good one coming from JAMB. As much as the They want to keep the integrity of the exam. They also want to make sure that the students are safe, their registrations are actually taken in, it's counted, there are no surprises on the exam day. So kudos to JAMB, and we look forward to more innovations from them that will make the lives of students easier and make the lives of parents also easier. Uniben Bossa escapes kidnap attempt as gunmen kill NSCDC officer, cut away rifle. This is sad. We talked about, some time ago, we talked about the safety in institutions and how it's gradually becoming a source of concern. The Uniben Bossa, we're happy for him, and we send condolences to the family of the NSCDC officer who was killed. We're hoping and we're praying and we're hoping and praying. That's one thing we do very well in Nigeria, that our security situation is much better than it is right now, that we have better, the security situation is much better, and that we have it safe for everyone. 2021 UTME. Our children are being frustrated over NIN registration. Wow. Okay, so just some some headlines before this was JAMB making registration easier or introducing a new feature, but where the registration is tied to having a NIN, the national identity number, I think that's going to be a huge headache for so many people. Registering for the NIN has not been easy, and over time there are ways that these things could be made easier for students. It maybe at the registration points. You have also the NIN registration at that point. If it's deployed to institution premises, it could be easier for the children, as it has become mandatory to have a NIN to register for the UTME. Then the avenues of registering and making it easy to register should also be made available and should be made accessible for the children. I quite understand what the frustration is like. That race for NIN registration is not one that anybody wants to go through right now. The crowds at the offices are so much, and let's not forget that we are still dealing with a pandemic. So we hope that this is something that can be rectified. We need urgent intervention so that we don't have children having to stay at home avoidably. Our next headline says Idahosa donates classrooms to husband's alma mater. So Bishop Margaret Idahosa has donated some classrooms to her husband's alma mater. That's commendable, and we say thank you to her. Congratulations to the school on the new classrooms. And well, when schools have, or when institutions have good effects on students, things like this will keep happening. And that's why we keep running the show and hope that the entire system is much better and students can come back. And in this case, even when the student is not physically available or being able to make the decision to give back, their spouse can give back, children can give back to their parents' alma mater. That's a good one this morning. Multina Teacher of the Year, 6 entries. So that is open. The portal is open to nominate Teachers of the Year, sponsored by Multina. Let's go there. See, I think teachers can nominate themselves, and the students can nominate them, their colleagues can nominate them. Let's celebrate hard work. Let's celebrate diligence. Let's celebrate people who are putting in effort into doing their work as it should be done. I look forward to seeing who the Teacher of the Year is at the end of the Multina entries when it's finally completed. And on that note, we welcome the safety chick to the building this morning. Good morning, Ugochi. Okay, it seems she's still settling in. We probably will come back to Ugochi as we go on. Oh, great, great. Good morning, Ugochi. You're welcome this morning and happy weekend in advance.
We should say, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm fine, very well. So, we're still running through the headlines before we go into our topic for today, and we're just on the last three. So, all teachers should be trained to screen for disabilities, says educator. I think you came in at the very right time.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that because the truth is we can't keep on allowing it to just be some teachers that know how to do that and not all teachers, because the truth is at some point in the should I say work span of an educator, you're going to meet children with a different spectrum of disability. And if you do not have any idea about it, if you do not even know what is, you might end up labeling the children wrongly and thinking maybe they are just being deviant when they actually need special attention, when they actually need, should I say, extra help. Do you see what I mean? So it's really important that
Yes.
all educators know at least the basics so that when they
Hmm.
see certain situations, they see certain traits, they are quicker to identify it for what it is, and then they can take the right.
And this headline ties with what our discussion this morning is going to be about. So we would come back to this as we talk this morning. But let's quickly go through the next headline. Ogun State Governor Abiodun gives LASU best graduating student and teacher bungalows and cash gifts. What's your thought on this?
I believe that that is really encouraging because many times people think that being a teacher is you don't get well paid, you don't get the good things of life. So it's a good thing that opportunities are now beginning to show up more and more that shows that teachers are being appreciated. Because the truth is, there are people who would only give their best when they know that there is some sort of reward. There is some sort of reward for excellence. And so I think it's a good thing. And we hope that more people, because the number of teachers we have is quite a lot. So a few here and there, it's almost like I say a drop in an ocean. So we need more people, more organizations, more individuals to begin to create quota for doing things in education, so that it's going to, should I say, the impact would reach out more.
And I particularly like the gifts. You know, usually the kind of gifts you have, even when you have first class students, sometimes the kind of gifts you hear are so not
Yeah,
commensurate
5,000
to the
naira,
effort that's been put in.
10,000
In
naira.
fact, I didn't even want to go into into naming the gifts because you see young people, you see the youth of the country running into competitions that really do not have so much of substance, but because the prize, the grand prize, or even the consolatory prizes make a lot of sense. You see them running into it. So for this, the prize for me is like, yes, everything. Thank you to the Ogun State Governor and congratulations to that best graduating student and the teacher. And on the final note, Lautech gets acting VC. Okay, we're glad find at least one school is getting their management team, their leadership right. It seems to have been a serious tussle this season, but we're happy for Lautech and that the academic session can run without having this as a problem to deal with. All right, so let's go into our topic for this morning. We're talking about classroom size and its effects and its impact on teachers. Um, let's have your opening statement, Ugochi. Are you there?
So if the truth, the honest truth is, yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I
Can you
can.
still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Please confirm you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, so there's a lag. All right, so I'm saying that honestly, the any class that is too large will not bring out the best performance in a teacher. That's just the honest truth. However, we are aware that maybe because of the situation in public schools where the numbers are really high and there's a limited number of should I say staff, so they try to make do with what they have. But if we really want to be fair and we really want ultra performance from our teachers, and also so that the children also do not get lost in the crowd, because that's another thing that tends to happen when the class size is really big. So some children get lost in the process because, again, not every child learns at the same pace as others. And so if they're already getting lost in the process and then there is no ability to, there's no ability and opportunity to even notice that something is amiss, then it becomes a problem. Yeah.
Okay. We talked about students getting lost. Yes, sometimes. But before we go into students getting lost, what do you think an ideal classroom size should be? Now, regardless of whether it's a private institution or a public institution, or government owned, what should an ideal classroom size be?
I think it varies from school to school. I've seen schools that do 20 and I've seen schools that do 40. So I would just say that a fair range is between 20 to 40, because in fact 40 is actually still large, but if we're trying to say for the case of public schools who really have sometimes 100, you know, we can how to bring it down and still make it as accessible, as possible. I would say a range between 20 to 40 works just fine in my
Okay,
own
so
personal experience.
okay, when I heard the range of 20 to 40, it's quite interesting for me because yeah, at a point I had about 100 and about 115 students in a class that I taught, and till today, I'm sure there are some of the students in that class that will meet me on the way and say, "Oh, you were my class teacher," and I would not even have an idea that I ever saw them before because it was such a large class. There were over 100, about 115, and definitely there was no way to pay individual attention to every of the students. There was the burnouts, there was the uh, class control issues, there was class management issues, all of that was there. So when I hear that range, sometimes I feel, and also I've been in a school where you have just about 6 students in a class. But as Ugochi said earlier, it depends on the school, really. It depends on what their well, maybe the full size is, what the vision of the school is, what their method, what their system is. That's what determines, for some schools they have a wait list for admission, for some they just take everybody as they come. For some we already have our classes filled up and we're not taking any more. But for some others, it could be, well, the more we have, the better for us. It's it's good for business, it's good for profit. And on that note, I welcome Mrs. Ajayi into the program this morning. You're welcome.
Welcome, ma'am.
Good morning. And so I'll be directing that question to you. How does school profitability, how does it affect where the school leaders, or where maybe the founder, the proprietor, they're more concerned about profit they're making over the size of the classroom? What's the effects that this eventually has on the effectiveness of the teacher, on children's performance, and then maybe on the reputation of the school? What's the effect?
That's a really good question, to be honest. And let me take a second to think about it. So when you think about the effects, right? So it can have the effect, to be honest with you, depends on the age of the school. And let me explain. So for a school who's been in existence for about 30 years, 40 years, people, they've built a reputation, right? So if they have all those number of children in the classrooms, people might not blink an eye if the children are not doing well. Because they want to be affiliated with that school, they will just get lessons. That's what you might find. The parents would just get a lesson teacher, and even if they are not happy with what's going on, they would stay there anyway. And what typically happens is the school can tell you things like, "Oh, we will teach for the child's learning and their ability to bring it back. It's your responsibility as a parent. So you have to go, you have a role to play as well as a parent." However, in terms, just to go straight to your question, and in terms of the effects that this would have, it's not great for the children, because it's not just about cognition, right? There's also the social element, and for really good learning to take place, there needs to be that interaction, purposeful interaction between the teachers and the students, so and even controlled interaction as well between student to student, where a teacher is monitoring interaction just to be sure that some of the social vices or ills that can flow with that kind of large population size is not doesn't take effect, or doesn't have effect in her own or his own classroom. So what you might find again is that the teachers, of course, they'll be burnt out. The teachers will also not really care, because that's the culture of the school. It's not really, do your best and leave the rest, so to speak. So the teacher will do as much as they can, and they will just not be able to do it all. So at some point, that's, I can't even care about this, would start to creep in to the teacher, especially when you've done it, you've complained, you've talked, the ratios are not improving, nothing is being done. At some point, the teacher is just going to give up and say, let me do the best that I can and just leave it, right? So that's what you might find. But on the long run, right, it does tarnish the reputation of the school, especially for parents who are, the sort of parents we have right now are very involved in their children's education. From my from current research and data that is available, they're very involved. They want to know what's going on. They want to be sure that the money they're paying, they're getting value for the money that they're paying. Now, value again is dependent, like I said. For some people, it's simply because they want to be affiliated with the school. They want their children to link up with certain individuals, which will be perceived to be in that school. So it really wouldn't matter to them. But on the teacher's point of view, I don't think it's great, because every teacher goes into that profession to actually make a difference. So he or she will feel really gutted, really dissatisfied, because it's almost like they're just working for the money, right? The impact that they went into teaching to make, you won't really see it. Very few teachers actually don't care whether they're teaching or not. Very, very few. Most teachers actually want to make a difference in the classroom. So when they find that infrastructure or structure doesn't allow them make a difference, it's usually very heartbreaking for them as teachers. So those are the ways that large classroom sizes can affect the school and student learning and the teachers. But I'll just say that every school really should have a ratio. even for secondary school, there needs to be a ratio of teachers to adults. You know, the ratios increase depending on the age of the children, but there should still be that ratio. We're a school, right? And at the end of the day, as a school, our core is teaching and learning. Teaching and learning, of course, cuts across social, emotional, physical, cognitive, but at the end of the day, teaching and learning should be going on, and it should be as effective as it possibly could. Thank you so much, Finyi. Back to you.
Thank you so much for that. You have covered quite a number of areas that I think we should also still look at as maybe as separate entities. For instance, when a classroom, like when I had to teach about 115 students, planning for lessons was quite easy on paper. Like, okay, so this is what we're covering, this is what we're learning. But then when it came to the activity part, when it came to involving the student, initially I tried for maybe like the first week, but it was very difficult managing. And the classroom, the physical size of the classroom itself wasn't really great. So you had this cluster of, and it was an SS2 class, so high hormones. They're in that age where they're being quite rebellious, and they want to try out the teacher's patience and all of that. It didn't make for good class activity time at all. Now, where this is the reality of some teachers, can we really blame them when it comes to planning and assessment? Well, before I got to the school, the teacher that I was working with told me that there was no need to grade them, like half term, or give them tests, or give them assignments, because she told me then, like, look, you're going to die if you want to do this thing. So their assessment was usually left until the end of term exam, which wasn't a fair it wasn't a fair basis to assess the students. You didn't have the continuous assessment. You just take everything and put it over 100. So whether a child was sick during the exam, or if something happened to them during the final exam, that their fate was sealed. So would it be the fault of the teacher, where planning, and, well, really now not planning, but where assessment and classroom activity involving the students is not top notch? Ugochi, can you please go first?
Okay, so it's just like what that's your friend, the other teacher told you that you're going to die. That's just what. So the thing is, as a teacher, you can even try, you can make an effort, but the thing is, your effort will not necessarily be sustainable long term, because the pressure on you is going to be too much. Because I've seen teachers who have been faced with ridiculous circumstances like this, who have also tried somehow, but the pressure on them is now a lot, most especially when they really want to give the students their best. So the pressure on them is quite a lot, and at some point something's got to suffer. So it's either at some point the schoolwork itself would suffer because they can't give it at their A best, as they started out, or they might strive to maintain that A quality of work, and then other aspects of their life suffer. So maybe their health, maybe their relationships with their family, So, and this is what we one of the things we talk about here on the show, of how it's important for teachers to have a well-balanced life. As much as, yes, our teachers are trying to do a great job and all that, we must also realize that they're also human beings who have families, who have other interests, and their life should not just begin and end with just schoolwork, right? So really, at some point, something's got to suffer. That's just the reality of the situation. And I don't think we can blame the teacher themselves, because it's tough. When you were talking and you were explaining about SS class, I totally understand, because the little times I have to go to a school and teach senior secondary school students, the way I prepare for senior secondary students is totally different from the way I prepare for primary school. I was still having this conversation with someone last year. When I'm going to a secondary school, my preparations are totally different, because I know what I'm going to meet in class. You're going to meet guys and girls who feel that they are too much, and who is this person coming to talk to me? So if you are not able to manage those things, be friendly with them, gist with them while still being strict, you're going to lose your class. So so when a teacher now has to face that 100 and something of that every day for how many hours? Oh my goodness, I'm even feeling sorry sorry for the teacher. It's not easy. So at some point, it's going to affect the teacher's productivity and ability to give their best. And this is why we keep hoping, we keep talking about these things and advocating that government should do better, so that we have more teachers who can help. Because again, what can happen, that what can help in that class is if there is sort of a distribution of workload across several staff, so that it's not only one person who is carrying the weight of that. When there is that distribution, to some extent, it helps.
Thank you for that. Yes. No, for senior secondary, the ball is completely different. Okay, so let's move away from planning and assessment a little bit, and I would like to ask Ms. Ajayi this. For a teacher, creativity is everything. No matter how boring what you're teaching is, or no matter how simple it is, creativity, bringing in some humor. Some of the best teachers that I remember some, not because they were fantastic, but because the experience with them wasn't really nice. But some of the very good teachers that I remember is because they dropped a joke in class, or they had there was something they did to make the class lighter. When a class size is large, does this have any effect on teachers' creativity and their ability to pull off a great class?
That's a really good question, Fee. Really, really good question. Does class size affect creativity and classroom management? I would say it affects classroom management, but not necessarily creativity. So the teacher would know what she or he wants to do in the classroom, but the difficult part is the doing of it, right? And so one really major element about creativity is knowing that, you know what, I need to connect with the people that I'm having to be creative with. And basically, how do I so if the safety chick and I are in the same classroom and I'm the teacher, for example, for my creativity to really matter, for me to be able to really implement it, so my intention and implementation gap, for them to sync, I must understand what Fee is about. I must understand what safety chick is about, just so that when I'm laughing and playing and using those jokes and those real life scenarios, it's actually relevant to them. I can grab their attention, because they can see themselves in what I am saying. So I know what to do as a teacher, right? But I have 150 students. How am I going to connect with each of these students becomes a problem. How am I going to ensure that everybody's listening becomes a problem? So it's not necessarily that I'm not creative or innovative. I just can't implement it. And so that in itself, it will affect my output, my productivity, in terms of the fact that I'm constantly churning out things. It's not like I can't, but is there any point to it really? My point is just to get into the classroom, teach as well as I can, and leave. Because being anything else, it's not productive. I'm going to feel really, because the thing with productivity, with innovation, is that you keep churning it out. So one thing happens, and then you're like, oh, let's look at this, let's look at this. So if it's just me with 150 students, I'm not going to want to create anything, because that in itself even takes away from the time that I have, so to speak, in the classroom. So in such a situation, you find that the teacher will stick to the basics. She will innovate, but it probably will be the very, minimum innovation is what you will see in such an environment, especially when they're not even sure what to do. So what I typically would like to suggest in that kind of situation is there a way we can group the children? Right? Is there a way we can group them? Is there a way we can find somebody, even amongst the student population themselves, who have sufficient influence over their friends, so that we can then use them as tools really for classroom management? That's something that I would say, because at the end of the day, being in a creative class and being in a class that is really interesting is important, because it keeps the children engaged. But you need to be able to understand every single child, or at least majority of the children, such that you can connect. Because if you have a sample population, for example, I have 50 children. If I get what 25 or 20, 30 of those children like, it's likely that the rest of the 20 we kind of fall into one way or the other, something that those 30 like. So that's a way that we can begin to look at that. So I'm creative, but how do I use it in this place? Right. And that's something that we need to begin to empower our teachers with. When you are in a large classroom, what do you do? How do you do it? Right? How do you manage the classroom? One way is, once again, use the students themselves, right? Find what they need and use it. But I mean, if I think about the public schools and the age of some of these children and the demographics generally sometimes doesn't lend itself to this sort of, but there is always a way. What the way is right now is a little fuzzy in my head because I've not really sat in that situation. But some of these things that I've said are things that I know would work with any demographics. Just finding the people who have authority in the classroom and making them your paddy in some way, and that way you can then leverage on that relationship to connect with all the other students and create pods within the class, learning pods, learning groups, and collaborative environments, which can then work, even if they all have to stand by the windows, as you normally see in some of these schools. Yeah, so I do hope my contribution made a bit of sense. And back to you, Finn.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense. Thank you so much for that. That was really good. And while you were talking, Ifyo came back. I saw her earlier and then she left, and now she's back. Good morning, Ifyo, and welcome to the show. Okay, I hope we can have Ifyok here. But you see, the last comment by Mrs. Ajayi is taking me into us now zeroing in on the teacher, on the person of the teacher, and how class size affects them. So yes, a teacher could have all the ideas and say, oh, I want this kind of engagement. I would like for the students to do this particular kind of activities. I'll give an example of when I had a smaller class, a class of 15, a class of 15. There were times when introducing a concept, we could do things like take away all the chairs in the classroom, put the one that really stands out for me was teaching biodiversity and then introducing the class with a gallery walk. So before the students came into the class, all their chairs were out, the tables were arranged like. Okay, wow, the network this morning is fantastic. So we had the tables arranged like a museum, and then we had different plants, different sizes, all sorts of plants that we could get and put on the table. So as the children were coming in, they were walking around. So that was their introduction to it. In a class that is larger than that, that cannot be achieved. Now, if a teacher has ideas like this, they have ways of simplifying the lesson for the students, but they're not able to implement that. What does it do for the teacher's morale? As somebody who is fired up, who is geared up and ready to give their best to their students, but then they have this handicap of you just cannot manage it because in some classes, it's best to just keep the students seated. The longer you keep them seated, the better. The moment you begin to say, oh, let's stand up to do this or let's do this, that's the end of control for a long time before getting them together again. So what does classroom size do for teachers' morale? And I would also link that with turnover. Could this be responsible for why certain schools will lose their teachers more often than other schools? Ugochi, please go first.
It's going to affect the morale because, as you were speaking, I actually put myself in that situation. If as a teacher, you have this fantastic plan of how you want to communicate to your students, and everything is just defeating the whole purpose. Now, it takes a lot of, should I say, mental toughness to not allow it to weigh you down. So you will not have to find out that you keep on thinking, okay, this is my preferred way of doing this, but I can't do it. But this is what we can do that maybe is a little bit close, but we can just manage. So it can dampen morale because you just feel like you are fighting against a system. And at some point, it's going to really weigh you down. So if you are not somebody who is normally mentally tough, it will be a problem. Now, if you are someone who is mentally tough already, at some point, even you get to that, you get to that breaking point, right? So you keep trying to look at things from the positive way. So for example, when you gave the example of the gallery work, and that teacher might say, okay, we may not be able to do gallery work because of this class. How about maybe we rent a projector and then see how we can project maybe a video on the screen? But you see now, if it's in a public school, the teacher will not be thinking, will there be light, or is there a gen? Do I need to buy fuel? So the thing, it's crazy. You begin to see all the different things that can come up. And so it takes a lot of ingenuity to say, okay, these are the ways I would prefer, but it's not available. What can I do? So that at every point in time, they keep thinking positively. Otherwise, the situation is enough to dampen morale and just make you say, well, I beg, let me just be managing the basics that I can do. And that is what we don't want. We don't want the teachers to feel so discouraged to the point where they're just doing the basics. You know, it's not going to be good for their own creativity, and it's also not going to be good for the students.
Thank you. Thank you for it's not going to be good for the teacher and it's not going to be good for the student. Yes, a happy teacher is a happy classroom. And an unhappy teacher, well, the classroom is not a very happy one. Welcome back, Ifyok. I hope we can hear you now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Oh wow, it's good
Okay.
to hear you finally.
Oh my goodness, you cannot imagine, but it's good to be back.
Yeah.
What have I missed?
A lot,
I know I've missed a
lot,
whole
but I'm
lot. I
happy you're
know,
in.
I know. I've been trying to come in from the beginning, like.
I'm happy you're in now. And yes, I would really like
Okay,
to get your
so
thoughts on this, on
mhm.
when a classroom when the size is a large one and the teacher has a lot of creative ideas, but they cannot implement it because of the size. What does it do to the morale of the teacher?
Okay, so what does it do to the morale of the teacher? Oh, well, I think it's pretty obvious that it could be very, let me put it that way, it can affect teacher motivation in a very negative way, because a lot of teachers, I believe, who are handling large classes, they have a lot of things on their plates. They have to consider how to meet the individual needs of the child. They have to think of innovative ways to engage the children in learning and to actually make sure that that they meet their objective. You know, that the learning objectives are fulfilled for for every child. And it they also have the challenge of planning. Planning for a large class, I tell you, is different from planning for a class of say 18. So I'm considering a large class to be with the numbers of 50, 40, 30 and above. Planning for that size of classroom is different from planning for a classroom of let's say 18 to 20 children, which is about the close to the ideal number, okay, of a class size, depending on the age of the children. So for primary, it will be about 18. The ideal, okay, the ideal number would be about 18. So planning for that number of children is that express all the creative ideas you have for the child of half a crew. You have a lot to grapple with in terms of how to position the children or how to provide for them, how to make them comfortable enough to learn. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great. Okay, so if I just go straight to what it does to the morale of the teacher, it definitely would not be encouraging. So going forward, it would demand a lot of input from that teacher to be able to achieve, to wake up every day and feel motivated, to wake up every day and feel excited. Oh, I'm going out to make a change. I'm going out to meet these children who are looking up to me. It will take a lot. And the administration also has a lot to play, has a hand in it. What provisions are made for the teacher themselves, not necessarily looking at, oh, okay, I need to make profit or I need to be able to increase the number of children. What's the teacher to student ratio that will support this teacher to be able to achieve more? So yes, it's a given. Teacher motivation can dwindle, but there's always a way out.
Thank you, Ifeok. The network is still playing some games,
But
but we were able to hear you.
I don't
Thank you
know
so much.
if you can still hear me.
I can still hear you. It sounds like something from sci-fi movie, but I can still hear you. Thank you so much for your contribution.
Can you still hear me?
Oh wow.
Okay,
I didn't hear the last things you said. Okay, we're not hearing if you're very well. No, we're not hearing if you're very well. So, but we're pressed for time right now, and as we round off, I would let's take this comment from Chinyere Princess of Four. Classrooms should be sized for effectiveness of education delivery. Though a smaller class size may be a solution practicable in mainly private schools. Thank you, Princess. We're looking forward to the day when we would have, or maybe it's been done before, where we had very standard private government-owned schools that made all of the difference, where private schools couldn't really compete with them, or private schools were running to compete with government-owned schools. We're hoping that that standard, we can have something better than that, and have well-sized classrooms for effectiveness, and a system that parents will be happy to put their children in. Children will come out of there being well prepared for life and what they have ahead of them. But as we round off this morning, one last thing that I would like each of our analysts to touch, as they also give their parting remarks, is what is the effect of a large classroom size on the teacher's health? So Ugochi, please go first, and then we'll have Ms. Ajayi, and then we round off in about 2 minutes. Thank you. Ugochi, can you hear me?
A large class. Yes, I can hear you. So a very large class size at some point, if the teacher does not have help, is going to affect the teacher's health, because if you're not now able to balance, if you're not able to draw the line and say, okay, I have certain limitations because of my class size, and so in order to still ensure that the other parts of my life work properly, I have to should I say create a balance and not put myself under certain kinds of pressure. It's going to affect the teacher. But if the teacher is able to say, so this is what is going on, and I don't want this to affect my health, I still have a family to go back to, I have other obligations as outside the school environment, and then put things in place, oh well, they'll be able to manage. So you see teachers who have taught in public schools for almost all of their career, students of over 100, and they are still managing. They've been able to draw the line and say, okay, this is what I will do to ensure that the children get what they need, but I'm not going to cross so and so boundary so that it doesn't now begin to affect my life and my health. Yeah, so yes, it can affect one's health if not properly managed.
Thank you very much for that, Ugochi. Mrs. Ajayi, over to you.
Yeah, so it would affect anybody's health, to be honest. Even when you have 5 children and you're alone, and there are 5 active children, it would definitely affect the health of anybody, to be honest. I mean, even right now, I'm not at work yet. I'm taking things easy because I'm not feeling too good, right? Because there's just all sorts that I've had to do. And I'm dealing with adults. So I coach and train adults. And then we're talking about children and teenagers. My goodness. I used to just so it does affect the health of the team. Like I said, right? Sometimes it's even the morale that kind of seeps in because sometimes the way you think, right, affects your feelings. Not sometimes, every time. The way you think about something begins to affects the way you are feeling about that thing. And that seeps into your action. You find that just thinking about going into that your class, you start to feel ill. And then all of a sudden you're lethargic. So it does affect the sizes or simply because my morale is down. I don't have the energy to move like I should. So I'm just basically carrying myself. I can even begin to feel a little feverish, because I'm down, I'm out, I'm just not interested. I'm unhappy as a teacher because what I came into the profession to do and what I'm doing or able to do are totally different. So that disharmony on the inside of me in itself it has a direct influence, to be honest with you, on health and wellness. So it's something that we really do need to look at. We need to really look at it and say, what can we do about this class sizes, right? How can we use NYSC, the NYSC, the coppers, a bit more functionally in our schools? It's 1 year, right? I mean, Teach for Nigeria does it. Many of these other programs do it. Give them a reason. Let them understand that they're giving back because it is a higher calling, to be honest with you. I can't even lie about it. So that's how it does affect. I didn't hear the second thing that you said. Oh, our parting words, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So as a teacher, I would say, you know what? You're going to have to find joy in things outside of your classroom. So I always encourage teachers, don't let all your friends be teachers because your conversations will ultimately be about the same thing. So find people outside of your teaching circle, right? Because it develops resilience in other areas. It develops depth for you in other areas. Sometimes just hearing how some other industries are happening makes you wonder, oh, wow. For example, my sister and I were having a conversation this morning, and she was saying from nowhere, they changed their closing time to 6 p.m. from 4 p.m. From nowhere, and that everybody is so lethargic. Exactly. Everybody is so lethargic in the office that yes, they're getting paid, but at some point you are tired. And then 6 p.m. with this COVID-19, you have to get into traffic every single day to get home. That's so many people are like, you know what, maybe I want to leave this company. Maybe, so those are things that we might not think about. We don't realize that it happens in other institutions as well, but it does. So just getting out of that whole teacher circle kind of helps you get perspective and kind of grounds you as well. And then I would just encourage gratitude and thankfulness. To be honest, sometimes it's difficult to be thankful in some certain situations, but that's what gratitude is about. Finding those things that make you say thank you to God. That's it. Thank you so much, Finn.
Thank you so much for that. I see a question, a comment from Princess of Four. She says, I wonder though if this discussion is limited to physical classrooms, are virtual classrooms being considered? And I would say very simply, yes, the discussion we've had so far is about physical classrooms. For virtual classrooms, they're much easier to manage. You have breakout rooms. It doesn't really matter the number of people in a virtual classroom. You can have them broken into groups and then have them interact, have them do activities, discuss in smaller groups. So in fact, I think the joy of any teacher, or the joy that the COVID-19 pandemic brought to teachers, is the fact that you can have virtual classrooms, which are a lot more easier to manage and make the teacher's life much better, a whole lot more better. So thank you so much, Ugochi. Thank you, Mrs. Okenfo Ajayi. Thank you, Ifyok, for being here despite the network challenges, and to all of our tribe members who have joined us this morning, Sunday Oladokun, Collins Ekere, Chinyere Princess of Four, and every other person who has been on this call this morning. We say thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend ahead and catch you next week, but we will not go without signing out and wishing you and dropping our usual cheer of the morning. So as we sign out this morning, we say that
it's always a great
always
morning.
a great morning on the Good Morning Education Show. It's always a great morning. Thank you for being here. See you next week. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.